It was 3 a.m. in the morning. I was alone, and outside the window a child was standing. I stopped. My hands didn't move. My feet didn't move. I just stopped and looked at that child. It didn't move either. Not at all. Not once. And that was the thing, that one thing that broke something inside me that night. Because children move. It's their nature. When they stand, their weight shifts from one foot to the other. A hand reaches for something. A head turns toward a sound. Eyes blink. Something is always happening, always. But this didn't happen. It just stood there, in one place, in the same way, perfectly straight, perfectly still. And then my gaze went to its face. It was looking at me, not toward me, toward my exact spot, the exact place where I was standing, behind the curtain, in the dark room. No one could see me from outside, but it was looking straight into my eyes. I tell this story to very few people, not because I don't remember. I remember. Every day I remember. At night when the house goes quiet, it comes back. My attention goes toward that window, that yard, that spot where it stood, and toward the place where it shouldn't have been. I want to tell you everything, straight, without changing anything, without making it dramatic. It's enough on its own. So, let's start from the beginning. This was about 14 months ago. I was living alone in a rented house, outside the city about 40 minutes away. I'd shifted there after a new job. The rent was cheap, the commute was manageable. The house was small, 3 rooms, 1 kitchen, 1 bathroom. There was a small yard in front, and on one side there was a bit of space where the landlord's wheelie bins were kept. The house was clean. The boiler worked fine. Sleep came well before time. I had been living there for 7 months when this happened. 7 months, that's enough time to know a house. I knew which floorboards creaked, which door opened by itself if you didn't set the latch, what time the boiler came on at night, and that specific sound the pipes made when it was cold outside. I knew the specific silence that settled after midnight. It was my home. I knew it. So when I came home that evening, opened the door and stepped inside, and paused for a moment in the hallway, I knew something was different. No sound, no smell, nothing visible, but something was there. A feeling, like someone had shifted the furniture in a room by a couple of inches. Nothing missing, nothing broken. Just something was off. A feeling you can't name. I stood there a while, then took off my coat, went to the kitchen, ate something, watched something on the laptop, washed the dishes, brushed my teeth. At 10:30 I went to sleep. I woke at 2:47. I know the exact time because I checked my phone. 2:47. The room was dark. I lay there quietly for a few moments. The way you do when you wake suddenly, you think, what happened? A sound? A dream? Nothing came. For 2 or 3 minutes I lay there just like that. Everything quiet. Then sleep began returning. My eyes were getting heavy, and I was almost asleep, right at that edge between sleep and waking, when a sound came. From outside. From the yard. It wasn't very loud. Quite soft. Almost nothing. Like wind, or an animal, or the house settling. A soft sound. Repeated. Irregular. Like something lightly touching a surface, again and again and again. I listened. Paused. Then it came again. Soft. Patient. From the front of the house. I sat up. My bedroom is at the back of the house. The bedroom window faces the side yard. That small space where the bins are kept. The front yard is visible from the living room. The living room is down a small corridor, behind a closed door. I got up and went out, didn't turn on the light, went through the corridor, entered the living room. The room was dark, lit only by the orange glow of the street lamp outside. I went to the side of the window where the curtain meets the wall. where I could see out but couldn't be seen from outside. I looked. The yard was visible. Small, patchy grass, low wall at the front. That gate I'd always meant to fix but never did. The latch didn't catch properly. Pavement, road, parked cars. And in the middle of the yard, between the gate and the window, a child was standing. Wait, I want to be careful here, because this is important. My first thought, genuinely my first thought, not saying this for drama, was that this was a lost child. A sleepwalking child. Children being outside at 3 in the morning isn't normal, yes. But children do strange things. They sleepwalk. They wander off after something. They don't realize where they've ended up. That was my first thought. Lost child. Needs help. Then I looked carefully. The child was small. Looked about 7 or 8 years old. Difficult to judge in the dark. A light-colored top. Something dark below. Pants or leggings. No coat. No shoes that I could see. And it was looking at my window. Directly. Only at my window. Not at the neighbors' houses. Not at the road. Only my window. The exact spot where I was standing. At the side of the curtain. And it wasn't moving. Not a small movement. Not the rise and fall of breathing. Not a shift of feet. Nothing. Absolutely. Nothing. Nothing. I counted my own breaths for 30 seconds. Maybe more, because there was nothing else to do with my hands. It didn't move. Not once. And then I thought, when my gaze went to its face, it wasn't blinking either. Or if it was, I couldn't catch it. It was just there. Standing. Looking at me. The first thing I could think of. I picked up my phone. Called the police helpline. Said there's a child in my yard. Alone at 3 in the morning. They took the address. Said someone would come. Said not to go near the child until the officer arrived. That felt strange to hear. Don't go near the child? But I agreed. I went back to the window. It was still there. Car passed on the road. The wind stirred the grass along the wall at the edge of the yard. The gate shifted slightly in its place. That familiar, almost latch sound came. The child reacted to none of these things. Nothing. Not even when a leaf moved. Not even when the car's lights passed. Kept looking straight at me. I thought to pick up my phone. Should take a photo. I don't know why I paused a moment. Then picked up the phone and aimed through the gap in the curtain. The child's head moved. Just slightly. A fraction. Tilting to the left. The way someone tilts when they're staring at something they can't understand. I lowered the phone. I couldn't make sense of it. Can't explain that reaction. I only knew this, the stillness that had been there was already wrong. But the head tilting, that was more disturbing. Because it wasn't stillness. It was awareness. It was a response. It was saying, I see you. I see what you're doing. I stepped back one step. The police came in 22 minutes. I know because I tracked the time from when I called until headlights appeared at the other end of the road. In those 22 minutes, I didn't go back to the window. I sat stiffly on the sofa in the dark room and listened. Any sound from the yard? Footsteps? The gate? Anything? The house was quiet. When the headlights appeared, I went to the door. 2 officers came. I told them a child in the yard standing, not moving. One of the officers was a woman, younger than me, completely calm. She asked exactly where the child was standing. I went with her to the gate, pointed to the spot, the middle of the yard. No one was there. Completely empty. That didn't have to be strange. 22 minutes had passed. Whatever it was could have left in 20 minutes. The woman asked, "Did the child say anything?" I said no. She asked, "Did you say anything?" I said no. She asked, "Are there small children in the nearby houses?" I said I didn't know. The other officer went down the road with a torch, came back and said nothing was visible. They took my statement, said they'd check the area while on patrol, then left. I stood at the gate for a while after the car disappeared from view. The road was empty. The yard was empty. In the cold air there was the smell of wet grass and something sweet I couldn't identify. I came inside, locked the door, checked the back door, checked the windows. Sleep didn't come that night. By morning I had told myself a story I could live with. A neighborhood child, a sleepwalker, or some strange childhood logic, something that only makes sense to a 7-year-old. The stillness I'd seen was my half-awake mind in the dark constructing something out of nothing. The head tilt was a coincidence. It happened at the same moment I picked up the phone. I made coffee, had a shower, went to work, mentioned a little to a colleague at lunch. They said it was creepy, said ask the neighbors if any small child lives nearby. I said yeah, I'll ask. I didn't ask. I thought I'd do it later. Then a week passed. Then another night came. 11 days later. By then I'd almost forgotten. Life had continued in its ordinary way. Work, cooking, talking to my brother, the business of buying a lamp I didn't even need. The image of the child had blurred the way dreams blur. You remember in the morning, struggle by afternoon, almost gone by night. Almost. I noticed one thing in those 11 days. A small habit had changed without my realizing. I'd started closing the living room curtains fully at night. Both sides, right to the wall, overlapping in the middle. Before, I'd always left a gap. I liked seeing the road from the sofa. Something had changed. Something I hadn't even paid attention to. The second night, Tuesday. I went to sleep at 11, asleep by past. Then my eyes opened at 3:14. Checked the exact time again. 3:14. Different time, not the same as the first night. That's fine, I thought. This makes a difference. Could be coincidence. I lay there, listened. The house was quiet, but there was something different about this quiet. There was an absence of something specific I'd always taken for granted, that faint life that exists even at 3 a.m. Somewhere in the distance a car, a dog, wind in the trees, the faint texture of a residential area through the night. That texture was gone. Everything was absolutely, deeply, densely quiet. I got up, living room, went to the side of the curtain, the same side, looked. The child was there, same place, middle of the yard, between the gate and the window, the same light-colored top or something like it. Couldn't be sure in the dark whether it was the same clothes or not. But that stillness, exactly the same. I stood looking and something happened in my chest. A kind of tightening, not panic, not complete, more of an inward pulling. Like the body had decided this was the moment we should remain still. I thought what I'd thought the first time. Lost child. Confused. Sleepwalking. There's some ordinary reason. But then one thing broke that chain of reasoning. I had closed the curtains fully that night. Both sides. Right to the wall. Overlapping in the middle. From outside someone would see only the fabric of the curtain. Nothing else. You don't know if anyone is inside or not. You don't know if someone is standing at the side of the window. And yet the child was looking at my exact spot. At the left side of the curtain where I was standing. Its face, now more visible than the first night in the street lamp's glow, that pale oval, was turned directly toward me. Slowly I raised my hand, palm flat, placed it on the glass. The child raised one hand. Slowly, in the same direction, and placed it on the glass, not near my hand, at the exact spot of my hand, where my hand was. I lowered my hand. The child lowered its hand. This time I didn't call the police. I knew what would happen. They'd arrive 20 minutes later, find the yard empty, do a circuit, find nothing. Last time it had felt pointless, almost embarrassing. But the real reason was the hand. The hand changed everything. The stillness could be explained, darkness, a half-awake mind, It finds patterns where there are none. But the hand? The hand was a response. Direct, precise, immediate. I raised my hand behind the curtain in the dark room, and it responded in exactly that spot. It saw me, not beside me, only me. I sat down on the sofa in the dark, tried to think, lined up the facts. First night a child was in the yard. Now a child is in the yard. Both times around 3 in the morning. Both times the same spot. Both times completely still. Both times looking straight at me, only me, exactly where I was. Coincidence didn't fit over all of this. I tried. That word wouldn't settle on them. I sat on the sofa. Didn't go back to the window. About 20 minutes later, the sound of the gate came. That familiar soft metallic rattle. Something passed. Then soft footsteps on the path. Quiet, light, moving toward the door. And then, so soft I almost missed it. Something at the front door. Not a knock. Not the bell. The soft sound of something being placed. A small hand, I thought, laid flat on the door. Placed on the door the way I had placed mine on the glass. I sat on the sofa. Made no sound. Made no movement. For a very long time, I don't know how many hours, I'd stopped looking at the phone. Then the sound stopped. I sat there until morning light came. Then got up, made coffee, and stood inside thinking about what I should do now. I want to be clear here. I was scared. Completely. Genuinely. The way you're scared as a child. And that fear had a specific quality. I'd never felt it before and haven't since. It wasn't the fear of something dangerous. Not fear of harm or injury in the ordinary sense. It was fear of something I couldn't put into categories. We are afraid when something has a shape, a difficult diagnosis, a car that passes too close, a person who wants to cause harm. These fears have forms. You can see them, assess them, decide about them. This fear of the child had no shape. It was amorphous. It sat inside my chest, and when I tried to look at it directly, it slipped away. Only visible at the edges of sleep, at the edges of thought, at the edges of understanding. I had no words for what that child was, and perhaps that was the most frightening thing. That morning, I went to work late, sat in the kitchen for a while with my coffee, looked at the back garden through the window. The neighbor's cat was sitting on the fence as always. A pigeon was walking on the grass. Everything was exactly as it always was. I decided to do 2 things. First, I get a camera, above the door, one that alerts me on my phone when there's movement and records. Second, I talk to the neighbors, both sides, also the ones directly across. Did anyone recognize this child I'd described? At midday, I went to an electronics shop, bought a small doorbell-type camera, connected to the phone, detected motion, recorded continuously. In the evening, it took an hour to fit it above the door, with the angle pointing down to cover the whole yard and gate. Tested it. The image was clear. The yard showed on my phone, gray and quiet in the dim light of that time. The gate was visible. The path was visible. The patchy grass was visible. That spot in the middle between the gate and the window. For 2 hours after that, I felt all right. Then I remembered the incident with the hand. The child knew where I was, behind closed curtains in a dark room. It had responded directly. What difference would a camera make? But I left it running. The next afternoon, I knocked on the left neighbor's door. An elderly man came out. I told him I lived nearby, apologized for the trouble, and then asked, had he seen any young child alone at night? I described it, small, about 7 or 8, light top, dark below. He thought for a moment and said, yes, there are children in some of the houses around. 4 houses down, a family has 2 small children, primary school age. And the house directly opposite, he thought sometimes a child comes there, grandchildren perhaps. I thanked him. I knocked on the door of the house directly opposite in the evening. A woman of about 60 came out. I asked her about the child. She said her granddaughter came sometimes on weekends, but hadn't come in quite a few weeks. I described what I'd seen. Small, about 7 or 8, light top, dark pants, no shoes. Something happened on the woman's face. Not much, a slight change around the eyes. She looked at me for a moment, then at my house. Then she said, "Keep your lights on." What did that mean? I didn't understand. "At night," she said, "keep the lights on inside. It helps." I asked, "What does it help with?" "In what?" Then she said something I've thought about many times since that day. She said, "That patch of dead grass in the middle of your yard, how long has it been like that?" I didn't understand the question. I turned to look at my yard from her doorstep. The grass throughout the yard was patchy. It always had been. I thought it was the landlord's negligence or the quality of the soil. Normal. But the middle patch, where the child had been standing, the grass there wasn't patchy. There was no grass there at all. A roughly circular patch about a meter across. Just bare soil. Pale. Dry. I had been living there for 7 months. I had never noticed this. Margaret, that was the woman's name. She said, "Come inside." Margaret had been living in this house for 31 years. She made tea without asking. Just made it. She sat down at the table with her tea and looked at me for a moment before saying anything. Then she said, "Many tenants had come to that house over the years. Most left within a year or two. She hadn't thought much about it at first. People move, that's what tenancy is. But over time she noticed one thing. The people who stayed the longest, they were the ones who were busier with work, who were home at night less." What did that mean? She said, "Meaning those who spent the most time at home at night, they were the ones who left first." I asked why. She held her tea in both hands and looked at the table for a few moments. "There was a family," she said, "quite a few years ago, 14, 15 years. A mother, father, and 2 children. Small. The older one was a boy about 8 or 9. The younger was a girl about 5 or 6. She paused. The boy had a habit of sleepwalking. His mother told me once he'd wake up at night. Sometimes he'd be found in the kitchen, sometimes in the back garden. The mother thought he'd grow out of it. She looked at me. One night the mother woke up and he wasn't in the house. Both of them searched the whole house, the back garden, every room. Found nothing. I waited. They found him in the front yard," Margaret said. "In the middle of the yard. In his pajamas, no shoes. Standing right there. In the dark of the night. I thought of what I'd seen. Light top. Dark below. No shoes. They brought him inside," she said. "In the morning, he didn't remember anything. Sleepwalkers never do. The mother started locking the bedroom door at night. Thought that would be enough." She looked at her tea. "About a year later, the family left. I didn't ask directly why. Thought it was work. But before they left, before the removal van came, the mother came to see me once. Said one thing I still remember. Margaret looked at me. She said, the boy had stopped sleepwalking months before. Locking the door had stopped it. But she said the house dog wouldn't go into the front yard. Not at all. Then the grass started dying in that patch. And she said they were glad to be going. I sat quietly for a moment, then asked, "What do you think is in the yard?" Margaret looked at me directly, said, "I think some places have certain things in them. This is one of those places. What exactly, I don't know. Maybe knowing the name doesn't make much difference." I asked her about the lights. She said, "I think it needs darkness. Or more accurately, it wants people who are in the dark, whose eyes haven't adjusted. Light doesn't stop it. Maybe just makes it harder." How did she know? Because the tenants who kept their lights on, they stayed in that house longer. I went home, turned on every light in the house, every room, hallway, bathroom, kitchen, all burning at once, and I sat on the sofa in the lit living room and stared at the window. You can think of a rational reply. I know, an elderly woman with long memories and a fondness for neighborhood folklore. She'd taken ordinary things and made a meaningful pattern out of them. A sleepwalking child, patchy grass, tenants who left in a year or two the way tenants do. I thought all of this, told myself. Then I remembered the hand. I placed my palm on the glass. The child had placed its hand in exactly the same spot, right where my hand was, behind closed curtains in a dark room at 3 in the morning. Coincidence doesn't do that. I looked at the camera feed on my phone. The yard was empty. The circular patch of soil was there in night vision, pale and still. The gate was closed. I fell asleep on the sofa sometime after 2. All lights still on. Nothing came until morning. For the next 4 nights, I kept all the lights on. Sleep came, not good, but some. I'd wake for hours and check the camera on my phone. Yard always empty. Gate closed. The patch of soil. Nothing. The 5th night I fell asleep early. Before 10. Lights on. Sometime in the night the power went out. I woke in complete darkness. Real darkness. Not the kind where eyes adjust. The kind where there's a weight on open eyes. I lay completely still. Picked up my phone from the bedside table. Screen lit up. 3:03. Signal bar was empty. Strange, but it happens. Used the phone as a torch. Got up. Went to the hallway. Pressed the switch, nothing. Kitchen, nothing. Every switch throughout the whole house just empty. The power had gone. I thought power cut. The whole streets. It happens. Went toward the front. Went to the window. Pulled the curtain aside and looked at the road. The whole road had power. Every other house. The glow of hall lights through frosted glass panels. A small lamp burning in one bedroom window of the house directly opposite. The street lamps were working. Only my house. I looked down at the yard. The child was there. But this time it was different. This time it wasn't alone. There were 2. 2 children. One in the original spot, the middle of the yard. The second one further forward. Between the first one and the window. Perhaps 2 meters from the glass. Both still. Both pale. Both looking toward the window. I stood there and something inside me went completely quiet. Not calm, not at all, but quiet the way it goes when you understand that something has fundamentally changed and that understanding hasn't reached the feeling yet. 2. I remembered Margaret's words. A family with 2 children. A boy of 8 or 9. A girl of 5 or 6. I didn't want to think what I was thinking. I turned away from it. But the second one, who was there close 2 meters from the glass, was smaller. Smaller than the first one. Maybe 5 or 6 years old. Maybe less. And something was different about this one. Not quite as still. Not quite as straight. As if stillness required more effort for this one. And then, as I was watching, the smaller one turned its head. Not toward me. Away. Toward the road. As if it had heard something from outside. As if something had come from that direction. The larger one didn't move. The larger one kept looking at the window. Looking at me. But the smaller one took 1 step. 1 step. To the left. Toward the gate. The larger one's head turned sharply. The smaller one stopped. I watched this. I was standing in the dark living room and I watched one stop the other. I watched one communicate with the other. There was structure. This wasn't one simple thing. It wasn't 2 separate things. There was intention. Nothing should have told me, but I knew this was one thing stopping another thing. I didn't know what to do next, but my hands wanted to do something, that part that deals with practical action, so I opened the camera and aimed it at the window. The flash went off. I hadn't thought about the flash. It wasn't intentional. For 1 second, the whole room turned white, and the window and the yard outside, and I closed my eyes against it. When I opened them, the yard was dark, empty. Both were gone. Sleep didn't come. I sat on the sofa in the dark. Phone torch aimed at the ceiling, giving a faint light. Waited for morning. At 6, I went to the fuse box in the utility cupboard near the kitchen. Every breaker had tripped. All at once, I reset them and the lights came back, and I was standing in the sudden brightness of the hallway, and I felt relief. So intense it was close to nausea. Made coffee. Sat down. Opened my phone. That photo. I'd taken it accidentally with flash in the dark room. Expected it to be useless. Bright foreground, dark background, the flash reflection in the glass blurring everything. There was reflection. There was glare. And beyond the glare, in the yard, 2 shapes. White on their pale tops from the flash. Dark below. Blurry. But they were there. 2 shapes in the yard. I stared at it. Then zoomed in. On the smaller shape. The one closer to the front, nearer the gate. Zoomed in on the face. The image was poor. Because of the flash and the glass and the low resolution, grainy and unclear. But I could see a face. Pale oval. In the flash's light. Eyes closed. I zoomed out. Looked at the larger shape. The first one. The one that had been there from the beginning. Its eyes were open. I called my brother that morning. Told him everything. Without editing, without modifying the way I do when I'm aware of how something sounds. The first night. The second night. Margaret. The photo. The power cut. 2 shapes in the yard. My brother listened to everything. Didn't interrupt once. When I'd finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then said, "Leave that house." I said, "I have a lease. 6 months left." He said, "I don't care about the lease. Leave that place." I said I couldn't explain to the letting agency that I want to break the lease because a child stands in my yard at night. He said, "Then don't explain. Just leave." I said I was thinking about it. I genuinely was. He said, "Come here for a few days. Take time off work. Come." He lives 2 hours away. A full, noisy house, sister-in-law, daughter. Normal, bright, full of sounds. I said I'd think about it. I meant it. But I didn't go. Not then. I don't fully know why. There was something practical, work, the lease, the weight of leaving a life even if temporarily. Something harder to name. A feeling that leaving wouldn't solve this. The question mark would follow. Whatever it was, I wanted to understand it first. And something, the hardest thing to admit, was because of the photo. That photo. The smaller shape's eyes closed. The larger ones open. Looking outward. Looking at me. I wanted to understand what I was looking at. I went back to Margaret. Next evening. Knocked on the door. She showed no surprise, as if she knew I'd come back. Made tea. We sat at the same table. I told her about the power cut. The 2 shapes. The photo. She looked at the photo on my phone. She looked at it for quite a long time. Then gave it back and said, "There's something I left out when you first came. I didn't say it then because I wasn't sure how ready you were to hear it." She paused. "The boy who stood in the yard," she said. "His younger sister. The small one. The girl." She looked at her tea. "She passed away a few months before the family left. Something sudden. Medical. I don't know the details. The mother didn't talk much about it. Just that it happened very quickly." She looked at me. After that, the boy started sleepwalking again. It had stopped for months. Locking the door had stopped it. But after the sister passed, it started again. The mother said she'd find him in the front yard, in the middle patch, at night. I felt cold. "The first 2 nights," I said. "There was only one. Tonight there were 2. What does it mean?" Margaret looked at me steadily, said, "I think something has changed. Something is different now." I asked what. "I think," she said, "you have changed." I didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said it, quietly, like she had been carrying it for a while and had finally decided to set it down. "When the boy stood in the yard, I told you he stood in the middle. But that wasn't fully right. He wasn't always in the yard." I looked at her. "He was at the window," she said. "The living room window, looking toward the yard, toward that middle spot, toward that patch of soil. His mother told me she'd find him standing there, just standing at the window in the dark, looking out. She let that sit between us. He wasn't looking at something outside," I said slowly. "His mother thought he was," Margaret said, "for a while. But," she wrapped both hands around her cup, "she told me once, near the end before they left, that she used to think he was watching something, keeping guard over something, the way children sometimes do when they sense something adults have stopped noticing." She paused. But then she said something she couldn't explain. She said sometimes she'd stand behind him, watching him at that window, and she'd have this feeling, like it wasn't him watching something out there. Margaret looked up at me, like something out there was watching him. The room was quiet. I heard the clock on her mantelpiece, heard a car pass outside, heard my own breathing. "Or perhaps," she said very softly, "it was the other way around." I sat with that. I don't know how long. Long enough for the tea in my cup to go cold. Long enough for the light outside her window to shift from gray to the darker gray of early evening. The other way around. Not the boy watching the thing in the yard. The thing in the yard watching him, pulling him to the window, night after night, making him stand there in the dark, looking out, his small face against the glass. Not because he wanted to, because something wanted him there, and then his parents locked the door, and it couldn't reach him anymore. So it waited. 14 years it waited, and now I was there, and I had been going to the window, every time, in the dark, lit from behind, exactly where it wanted me. I set my cup down very carefully because my hands weren't fully steady. "I need to go," I said. Margaret nodded. She didn't try to stop me. She didn't say anything else. I walked to her door and stepped outside into the cold and stood on the pavement for a moment looking at my house across the road. The curtains were closed. The lights were off inside. I'd left in a hurry that morning. The house sat there the way it always sat, quiet and ordinary. But now I was looking at it differently. I was looking at the window, that living room window, and I was thinking about a boy of 8 or 9 standing there in the dark, night after night, drawn by something he couldn't name and couldn't resist. And I was thinking, that was me. That had been me. Every time I'd gone to that window in the dark, thinking I was choosing to look, it had been choosing for me. I stood there on the pavement in the cold for a long time. Then I went inside, turned on every light, and sat down at the kitchen table and started thinking about what to do next. I went to the letting agency the next day. I left work at lunchtime, told my manager I wasn't feeling well, which was true in a broad sense. The letting agency was in the high street. I'd been there once before when I first signed the lease. A young woman with a plant on her desk helped me. She brought up the property on her screen and asked what she could help me with. I said I wanted to know about the history of the property, previous tenants, whether there were any reports of anything unusual. She looked at the screen with a slightly different expression. The professional warmth thinned a little. She said they couldn't really share details about previous tenants. I said I understood. I only wanted to know if there was anything recorded, any complaints, any reports. She checked the property notes. She was quiet for a moment, then said the notes showed a standard history, regular maintenance, Boiler replacement 3 years ago. A damp patch in the bathroom resolved. I asked about the tenants before me. She looked again. Said the previous tenants had ended their tenancy early. 4 months still remaining on the lease. There was a note in the file. I asked what the note said. She looked at it. Something happened on her face, small, controlled. She looked at me, then back at the screen. It just says they wanted to leave, she said. I asked if there was anything else. She read it in a careful voice, like she was reading something she wasn't quite sure how to say out loud. Tenants report disturbance in front garden. Recurring. Unable to specify nature of disturbance. Request early release of tenancy on grounds of significant distress. She looked up. I looked back at her, and I thought about what those words meant. Recurring. Unable to specify. Significant distress. These were not my words. I hadn't written them. Someone else had sat in the same office, or maybe stood at a counter, or maybe called on the phone, and tried to explain something they had no words for. Tried to name what was happening to them. Failed. And in the end, the only thing they could say was, "We need to leave. We are in significant distress." I thought about them standing in that living room in the dark, going to that window, seeing what I had seen. I thought about how many nights it had taken before they came here and said those words. I thought about the family before them, the boy at the window, the girl in the yard with her eyes closed. I thought about how many people had passed through that house. How many of them had sat with this same feeling, this shapeless, nameless fear, and found no way to explain it to anyone. The woman at the desk was still looking at me. "Are you all right?" she said. I wasn't sure how to answer that. "I'd like to discuss ending my tenancy early," I said. I sat in the car outside the house for a while before going in. Looked at the house, the yard, the gate, the low front wall, the circular patch of bare soil in the middle. The afternoon light made everything look ordinary, pale and quiet, just a house on a quiet road. I thought about the previous tenants, unable to specify the nature, significant distress. I thought about the family, the boy at the window, the small girl. I thought about all the tenants whose distress had gone unrecorded, who had left without filing any report at all, because what do you write? What words do you use? I got out of the car, opened the gate, that familiar almost latch sound, walked up the path. I stopped in the middle of the yard, stood in the circular patch of soil. The soil was dry, pale as if moisture had been drawn out of it over a long time. The circle was roughly a meter across, and the edge wasn't gradual the way a dead patch usually is. It was sharp, grass right to the line, then bare earth. I stood there and looked at the house, the window, the curtains. I thought, from here, from this spot in the dark with the lights on inside, you can see everything. Anyone standing at the window with lights on behind them would be fully visible. Lit, framed, clear. But from inside with the lights on, you'd see nothing. Just the dark and your own reflection in the glass. I had been standing at that window with the lights off, both times, and I had seen the child. But what if the people who kept lights on, who stayed longer, never went to the window in the dark? Never looked out? What if not being able to see was the point? I stood in the circle of bare earth and thought, what does it want? The answer came before I finished forming the question. It wants to be seen. I went inside, made tea I didn't drink, watched the back garden go dark through the kitchen window, kept thinking, what I knew. Something was in that yard. Something that stood in a specific spot at a specific time, looking at the window. Something that was aware of my presence, through curtains and glass and darkness, that copied the hand, that the power went out when it came. What I didn't know what it was, what it wanted, only a vague sense that it wanted to be seen. What the smaller one was, Whether my theory was right or I had assembled a story from fragments just to have something to hold. What I didn't know, would understanding it make any difference? Margaret said some places have certain things in them. She didn't say you can reason with them. She talked about keeping the lights on. She didn't say you can fix it. I thought about the smaller shape turning toward the gate, taking one step, stopping. If the smaller one wanted to go, wanted to follow something, find someone, and something was holding her back, then the question wasn't only what this was. The question was, what was holding her here? I went back to the laptop that evening, back to the land registry records. Went deeper this time, past the property company, past the auction, past the previous owners I'd found before. The house was built in 1962. A family bought it then, lived there through the 60s and into the 70s. Then another family. Then a period of renting rather than owning. I went to the local newspaper archive again, searched more carefully this time. Not just the address, the street name, the area, broader terms. I found something, not about the house, about the street, about the land. It was an old piece, old enough that it had been scanned from a physical archive, the text slightly blurry at the edges, the layout of a different era of local journalism. It was about development, about houses being built on the street in the early 1960s, about the land being converted from what it had been before. Before the houses, the land had been used for various purposes over the preceding decades. Market gardens, a small holding, and before that, the piece went vague the way local journalism goes vague when it touches something it doesn't want to touch directly. There had been a period when the land had been used differently. The piece didn't name what that use was. It used language that circled around it. The community had a particular relationship with that land. Certain traditions had been practiced there for some time. I sat with that for a while. Some places have certain things in them. Maybe they have things in them because of what was done there, what the land was asked to hold. That night, I did something I hadn't done before. I turned all the lights off. I know what Margaret had said. I know what every rational instinct was telling me. Don't engage. Don't open the door. Don't go into the dark. I know all of that, but I kept thinking about the boy at the window, the way Margaret had described it, and the possibility, the thing she had said so quietly, so carefully, that it was the other way around. If it was the other way, if the thing in the yard was pulling someone to the window, using the window as a point of contact, some way of reaching through, then standing at the window, lit from behind, unable to see anything out, was exactly what it wanted. I had been doing exactly what it wanted. Every single time. I wanted to try something different. I turned off all the lights. Everyone. I sat in the dark living room on the sofa and watched the time on my phone. I sat until 2:50, close to the times of the first and second nights. Then I put the phone face down, gave my eyes time to adjust to the dark, and went to the window. In a lit room at night, a window is a mirror. You see yourself. You see the room behind you. You see nothing outside. In a dark room at night, a window is transparent. Your eyes adjust and you can see out. I stood at the side of the curtain in the dark room and pulled it aside and looked out at the yard. The yard was empty. I stood there and waited. The street lamp cast its orange light across the pavement and the gate and the near edge of the yard. The middle of the yard, the bare circle of earth, was in partial shadow. I could see it, but not clearly. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. Nothing. I was about to step back when I felt something that's difficult to describe. Not a sound. Not a sight. A change in some quality of the air, some pressure or temperature or something that doesn't have a name because the language for it doesn't exist. The way you sometimes know, without hearing or seeing anything, that someone has just walked into the room you're in. I looked at the circle of bare earth. The child was there. I hadn't seen it arrive. It was simply there, the way things in dreams are simply there, between one moment and the next, facing the window, facing me. But something was different. I was in a dark room, no light behind me, no lit frame, no mirror. The child could not see me the usual way, the backlit figure, the shape at the window clearly visible. And the child looked different. Not different in shape or size, different in the quality of its stillness. That absolute precision was still there. But there was something else. Something I hadn't seen on the previous nights. The child's face was not directed at me. It was directed at the window, at the glass, at the space between us. But there was something in the quality of it, something that was not looking but searching, as if trying to find something in the glass that it couldn't quite locate, as if, without the backlight, without the mirror, it could not see me clearly. I stood very still. The child's head moved, that small tilt I'd seen before, but this time it felt different, less like awareness, more like confusion. I thought, it can't find me. And then, before I had decided to do it, I raised my hand, slowly, the same way, palm flat, toward the glass. The child's head stilled. It raised its hand, but this time it didn't press toward my hand. Pressed toward the center of the glass, the middle of the window, not the spot where my hand was. Couldn't locate me. I stood there with my hand raised, and the child had raised its hand toward the wrong place, and I thought, this is the difference. This is what the darkness does. It disrupts the connection. Can't track me when I'm not lit. I lowered my hand. The child did not lower its. It held its hand against the empty center of the glass for a long moment. Then it lowered it slowly, and then it looked to the side. Not toward the road, the way the smaller one had looked before. Downward, at the bare earth of the circle it was standing in. And it did not look up again. I watched it for 40 minutes. In those 40 minutes it did not move, did not look up, did not respond to anything. I raised my hand again. I pressed it to the glass. I tapped the glass lightly once. A sound that in the still night should have been audible in the yard. Nothing. It was as if the connection had dropped. As if without the backlight I had become invisible to it. And without me to look at, it had nothing to do but stand there in the circle of earth and look at the ground. Around 3:40 I saw the smaller shape arrive. It appeared the same way between one moment and the next, closer to the gate, at the far edge of the yard. And immediately it did what it had done before, turned its head toward the road. Up the road, then down, looking for something, orienting itself by something beyond the yard. The larger one did not react. The smaller one took 2 steps toward the gate, and stopped. I could not see what stopped it. There was no visible force, no movement from the larger shape. Simply stopped, the way you stop when something holds you. When something has a grip on you that you can't see and can't name but can absolutely feel. The smaller shape stood very still. And then it did something it had not done before. Turned toward the window. It had never looked at the window before. On the previous night it had looked up the road and toward the gate and had been stopped, that was all. It had not looked at the house. It had not looked at the window. Now it turned toward the window and it looked directly at me. And unlike the larger shape, which had been searching the glass without finding me, this one found me immediately. The exact spot in the dark where I was standing. We looked at each other. I don't know how to describe what I saw in the smaller shape's face. I was at a distance, in the dark, looking through glass. The detail available to me was limited, but I saw something that I have come back to many times. It looked tired, not frightening, not threatening, not like something that wanted to harm me or reach me or pull me toward the glass. It looked tired, like something that had been standing in that yard for a very long time, and was exhausted by it. I didn't move for a long time. The smaller shape kept looking at me. The larger shape kept looking at the ground. The yard was still. The road was still. The cold air moved very slightly through the gap at the bottom of the window frame. I thought about Margaret, about what she'd said and hadn't said. I thought about the boy at the window, standing there night after night until his parents locked the door. I thought about what it meant to lock a door, to stop something from reaching where it was trying to go. I thought about the circle of bare earth, what had been done there, what that land had been asked to hold. I thought about the smaller shape and how it turned toward the gate and how something stopped it every time. And then I thought something that seemed at first very simple and then seemed less simple the longer I held it. What if the thing holding the smaller shape here wasn't in the yard at all? What if it was in the house? I stepped back from the window. I turned around and looked at the living room. My living room, the sofa, the lamp, the coffee table with the ring marks from months of mugs, the shelf I'd only half filled, the rug that had come with the house. When I moved in, I had searched the house. Not carefully, the way you search a house when you're checking storage and looking for damp and working out which rooms get the morning light. Practical search. I had not searched it the other way. I had not searched it for what had been left behind. I turned on one lamp. Just one, the small one by the sofa. Enough to see, but not enough to break the dark entirely. I started in the living room, moved the furniture, looked at the walls, the skirting boards, the floor. Nothing. I went to the kitchen, opened every cupboard, looked behind every shelf, moved the washing machine and looked at the wall behind it. Behind the washing machine, something was scratched into the plaster, at about knee height. Small letters, uneven, the kind made without much precision. Done quickly, or done in the dark, or done by someone whose hands were small and not yet steady. 6 letters. A girl's name, the same name I had seen in the newspaper archive. The girl who had died. The girl who had been 6 years old. Her name, scratched into the wall behind the washing machine, below the level of sight, hidden there for years. I sat down on the kitchen floor. I didn't plan to. My legs just took me down slowly until I was sitting on the cold tiles with my back against the washing machine and the name right there in front of me at eye level, and I looked at it. 6 letters. I thought about who had put them there. A boy, 8 years old, maybe 9, who had lost his sister, who had understood the way children understand things that adults have learned to look away from, that something of her was still here, still in this house, still connected to it somehow, that she hadn't been able to go. And what could he do? He was a child. He couldn't explain it to his parents. What would he even say? He couldn't fix whatever was holding her. He couldn't fight it. He couldn't name it. But he could do this. He could find the most hidden place he knew, behind the washing machine, in the dark, at knee height where no adult would ever look. And he could scratch her name into the wall with whatever he had. A coin, a key, a stone, pressing hard enough to leave a mark that would last, so that someday someone would find it, so that someone would know she was here, she was real, she had a name. Don't forget her. I sat on that kitchen floor for a long time. I don't know exactly how long. Long enough for the cold of the tiles to come through my clothes. Long enough for the lamp in the living room to seem very far away. I thought about the smaller shape in the yard, the exhausted one, the one that kept turning toward the gate and couldn't go through it. I thought about how long she had been there, 14 years, standing in that yard or near it or wherever it is that something like that exists for 14 years, long after the family left, long after the boy grew up and moved on. Long after anyone who had known her was gone from this street. Still here, still held. I reached out and touched the letters with my fingertips. The scratched edges of the plaster were rough under my fingers, small and careful and absolutely deliberate. She had a name, Somebody had made sure of it. The things I did next, I'm not going to describe in precise detail. Not because I'm protecting myself, because I don't know if they worked, because the honest version of what I did sounds, in daylight, like the actions of a person who has lost their grip on things. But I'll tell you the broad shape of it. I talked to the name scratched into the wall. I said her name. I said, I found it. I know you're here. I think I understand something. I think you've been here a long time. I think you've been trying to go. And I think whatever is in that yard, whatever is in that soil, has a hold on something connected to this house. A hold on you. I said, I don't know if I can change it. I don't know if it's mine to do. But I think you should have been able to leave a long time ago. I think something went wrong. I think you've been here far longer than you were ever supposed to be. I said, I'm going to stop giving it what it wants. I'm going to stop going to the window in the dark. I'm going to stop making it easy. And then I did the only other thing I had. I pushed the washing machine back against the wall, slowly, carefully, all the way, until it covered the name completely. I don't know why. Some instinct I can't explain. The name scratched there, visible, findable, felt like a thread. Connection. A way of holding on. And covering it wasn't erasing it. She had existed. That didn't change. The name was still there in the plaster behind the machine. But maybe covered was different from exposed. Maybe that small change meant something. Maybe it meant, you don't have to wait here anymore. You don't have to wait for someone to find you. Someone already did. I stood in the kitchen for a long time after, looking at the washing machine, the ordinary white surface of it, the hum it would make when it ran, the laundry I'd fold on top of it on weekday mornings. It looked exactly like it always had. I came back to the window. I stood in the dark room and looked out. The yard was empty, both shapes gone. The circular patch of bare earth, pale in the orange streetlight. The gate almost closed. The patchy grass. Nothing else. I stood there for a long time. Nothing came. I left the house 3 weeks later. I negotiated an early end to the lease. The agency cited the previous tenant's report and agreed without much difficulty. I moved into a flat in the city, close to work, one of those buildings where you can hear your neighbors through the walls and the light pollution means it never gets truly dark. I have not been back to that street. I don't know if what I did made any difference. I don't know if talking to a name scratched in plaster accomplishes anything. I don't know if covering the name was right or wrong, or if right and wrong have any meaning here. I think about the smaller shape sometimes, the way it looked at me from the yard, the way it found me in the dark when the larger one couldn't, the tiredness in it. I hope it isn't still there. I have no way of knowing. The camera. I should tell you about the camera. I forgot to take it down when I moved out. It was above the front door and I was moving quickly and it slipped my mind. I called the letting agency about it and they said they would retrieve it and return it when they had a chance. They called 2 weeks later, said they'd found it, no damage. They'd post it. Then the woman on the phone paused. She said, "Did you review the footage before you moved out?" I told her I hadn't. I checked it regularly in the early weeks, then less, then not at all. She said, "There's quite a lot on here." I said, "You can wipe it. I don't need it." She paused again, longer this time. She said, "Are you sure? There's quite a bit from..." She paused, as if looking at something, "from the last 2 weeks you were there." I thought about the last 2 weeks I was in that house. I had left all the lights on every night. I had not gone to the window after dark. I had not looked at the yard. I asked, "What kind of footage?" She said, "I'm not entirely sure. There's movement in the yard. Quite a bit of it. Mostly between around 3 and 4 in the morning." I sat with that for a moment. I asked, "How many nights?" She checked. She said, "All of them. Every night from when you stopped watching to the night before you moved out. Every night. Every night I had not gone to the window. It had still been there. Both of them, I assumed. In the yard. Between 3 and 4. It hadn't stopped. I just hadn't looked. I told her to wipe the footage. She said, "Are you sure you don't want to?" I said, "Yes. Please wipe it." She said she would. She posted the camera the next day. It arrived in a padded envelope. I put it in a box with some other things and have not taken it out again. I moved into the city flat in February. It's now October. 8 months. I have not woken at 3 a.m. since I left. I check my phone sometimes when I wake in the night. Out of habit, some reflex that hasn't fully faded, and the times are ordinary. 1:17. For 32. 2:55. No pattern. No precision. I sleep mostly through to morning. I have not told this story to many people. To my brother, who listened and said I should see someone, which I did briefly without mentioning the specific content because I didn't think it would help. To a friend who is interested in these things, who listened carefully, asked good questions, and said she believed me, which helped more than I expected. And to you now, I don't know what I expect from telling it. I have no conclusion, no explanation that wraps the whole thing up and gives it a shape that satisfies. I have a sequence of events, things I noticed, a photograph on my phone of 2 pale shapes in a yard at night, which I haven't deleted but do not look at, a name scratched into plaster, now behind a washing machine in a house where I no longer live, and the memory of the smaller shape looking at me across the yard in the dark. The way it found me when the larger one couldn't, the exhaustion in it. Some nights I think about the boy, now a man in his 20s somewhere, whether he has any sense of it, whether that thread between them, across whatever distance and whatever boundary, still has any weight to it. I don't know. I don't go near that street. I keep a light on. Not every night. Not the way I did in those last weeks. Every light blazing as if I were trying to hold something back. Just one lamp. In the hallway. The kind you leave on when you're expecting someone to come home. I know that probably means nothing. I know a lamp in a city flat means nothing to whatever was in that yard. But it's what I do. And most nights, it's enough. Most nights,